The NCAA tournament is in full swing, and we have another locked on bracket breakdown as the number one overall seed, Alabama, beats the 8th seeded Maryland Terrapins 73-51. I'm Isaac Shade, and we are joined now by the host of Locked On Bama, Mr. Luke Robinson. And Luke, let's start with what we all believe is one of the best players in college basketball this season. Brandon Miller is not going to be held down 2 games in a row. He just gets back going in this game. I thought had one of the best sequences in the entire game, had a block on one end, a 3 on the other to give Alabama a double-digit lead for the first time. What did you see from Brandon Miller tonight?
You know, I thought he came out and not timid. I mean, because he's not a timid guy ever. But I think he just wasn't in a flow yet. I mean, he couldn't get in a flow game one. He had 0 points in 19 minutes, of course. But tonight he was trying to get into a flow a little bit early, and it felt like he was forcing a little bit. But then it all, started to fall for him a little bit. Look, the team did not shoot well from the 3. Here's the real positive news, and I'm going to get back to your question. But
You're
Alabama played a B or B minus game and still beat Maryland by 22 points plus or minus. So that's very good news for Alabama fans. But Brandon Miller is just he's so good. And look, it coincides with the fact that there's some new revelations in the Brandon Miller saga that really should make some people eat some crow, quite frankly, who have really been on his case, literally and figuratively. And so I was excited for him to be able to have sort of a breakout game. He is dealing with this groin injury. Nate Oates said he was about 80%. I thought he looked about 80%. I mean, I think I would suspect we're going to see a lot better Brandon Miller and a lot better Alabama against San Diego State. They get up and down a little bit more than this Maryland team. Maryland, quite frankly, all due respect to the Terrapins, they came in with a game plan, but the game plan was, let's go make this as ugly and slow and plotting as humanly possible. And it worked for a little bit. The problem with that methodology is that if you ever get behind by, say, 8 to 10 points, you're in trouble because it's really hard to catch back up when your whole offense is, let's do a 3-man weave at the top of the key, and then with 9 seconds left in the shot clock, let's throw it in and see what happens.
Yes, not going to work against this explosive Alabama team who, oh, by the way, their defense is elite as well. Now, I like that observation that Brandon Miller is at about 80%. I agree with you there. Hopefully these days off ahead of the Sweet 16 will do him some good, and he'll be ready to go next weekend. Luke, I want to ask you about one of the unsung heroes of this team, Charles Bediako, who had a very efficient 4 of 5 night, just big presence in the middle. What does he mean to Nate Oates' club?
Charles Bediako is kind of, maybe just a little bit better than the Reese for Maryland. Reese is he's a bull, and guy, he's tough to deal with, and I can see why he's like a load in the Big Ten, because a lot of them play that style, and so he can just go in there and it looks like his elbows are made out of granite. And he's throwing people around, and Bediako's not that way. Bediako's a little bit he's frailer than that. He's not frail, but he is very, very thin, but he's beefed up. But I thought Charles really did well playing against Reese because he can be intimidating. And I thought Bediako got beat a little bit early. Then he got that 3rd foul, meaning Reese. And then Charles was able to let the game come to him. And by the time Reese came back in, Charles was manning up on him. And I just think it means so much. Look, this guy has really developed since coming in from Canada. Yeah, he's got to work on his free throws. No, he doesn't have the prettiest shot you've ever seen. But you know what? That's not what they need from him. They got Brandon Miller and another dude, Javon Quinley, for that. They need him to go up, catch alley-oops, alter shots, block shots, and get rebounds. And I thought he did a marvelous job of that night. And even when he missed 2 free throws tonight, he was able to get his own rebound. Now, I mean, this is good and bad. He missed it so bad he was able to get his own rebound off a free throw. But I think the crowd and the Alabama fans have really come to love Chuck, as we so affectionately call him. I don't know if anybody else calls him Chuck. I know all the fans do in the stands. I really don't know if anybody else does. But the fans really love him. Look, Alabama fans have a history of loving defense, and I'm talking about on all sports. So I think Chuck is a guy that the fans are going to gravitate to always.
Well, count me now as a guy who calls him Chuck as well. You talked about Javon Quinterly, and boy, was he on fire down the stretch of this game. But beyond that, Luke, I want to ask about the importance of Coach Oates moving him into the starting lineup and how that has impacted this team.
Jaden Bradley actually came to Oates during the SEC tournament and said, I think JQ has earned the right to start. He's a senior. Now he can also come back next year. It should be noted. JQ will have, been at Alabama longer than Bear Bryant if he comes back next year, but he can do it, and because of COVID. And Jaden Bradley, who's a true freshman, said, "Look, he's earned the right to start. He's playing really well. Let's let him start." And JQ has taken on that role and run with it. Now he only had 1 point or something like that against Missouri in the SEC tournament, but he played awesome in the SEC championship game. I thought he played really well the other day in the first game, and he certainly played well tonight. Look, there were times when he was the show for Alabama tonight. I mean, look, the threes weren't dropping. He made the first one, and then, it seemed to be a big drought until the next one. And then he had a couple late in the game that really, I mean, look, it was probably already salted away, but he made sure he put a stamp on it. And he also got a bucket late in the first half when there was no offense on the floor. Miller was off the floor. Clowney had just banged his knee. There was no offense on the floor, and Alabama was a little stagnant. And JQ goes in there and just muscles his way in for a layup, and it sort of set the tone for the second half.
You mentioned San Diego State earlier. That is Alabama's opponent coming up in the Sweet 16. We look for Brandon Miller for some health. You mentioned Noah Clowney. Hopefully he'll be able to get off his feet and get rid of that soreness. What do you look forward to, Luke, ahead of that matchup next weekend?
I just want to see some more offense. I mean, and I want Alabama to start raining in some threes. I mean, they've had a couple of moments in these last few games where you thought, okay, they're going to get on track. And man, I'm just telling you, it's in them. They are going to get back on track with these 3-pointers. I really believe that. And hopefully Friday is going to be the day, because that's when they'll play San Diego State in Louisville. And man, it's going to be an interesting grouping up there. It could be, now, I mean, Baylor and Creighton still have to play, but it could be Creighton, Bama, San Diego State, and Princeton. Who in the world had that on their bingo card?
Hand up, I did not. Folks, great stuff from Luke. For more on the Alabama Crimson Tide, make sure you subscribe to Locked On Bama. And for a full view of the bracket and all the college basketball action still going on, check out Locked On College Basketball. Both shows are part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.